Because I think that if we were to understand more of our design, I think we'd get injured less. I think we'd be healthier.
Before we get into the show, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, First Human, of which I am a co-founder. First Human is dedicated to extraordinary impact in the world through exceptional leadership. So if you're looking to elevate the leadership of your team or your organization, then do check us out. We also offer one-to-one coaching. So if you'd like to get coached by me or one of my extraordinarily talented fellow coaches, then head over to firsthuman.com. And with that, back to the show. Welcome to another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Betsy Polatin. She is a teacher and an expert in breathing techniques and a movement specialist. She's been teaching for 45 years. She's a former professor of the Alexander Technique at the Boston University of Fine Arts. She co-teaches with Peter Levine and Gabor Mate. Wow, it is with great pleasure, Betsy, that I invite you to Being Human.
Well, thank you, Richard. When I got the invitation from you people, I thought, being human and Humanual, like, could we ask for a better pairing? So I'm very excited to be with you on this day today.
Brilliant. And the book you're referring to is one that I have read, Humanual, a manual for being human, indeed, an epic journey to your expanded self. And it's just packed with insight and practical techniques. Yeah, about being human, which is wonderful. So we'll definitely get into all of that. And of course, you're also the author of The Actor's Secret, which I haven't read. But you come with just this wealth of experience, and I can't wait to tap it for our audience today. So I always like to start with some of your background, where you grew up, your childhood, some of those early experiences that shaped your present day interests and your career overall.
Yeah, I think it's not early, but it's fairly early. When I was younger, I was a dancer, and I enjoyed movement. I've always enjoyed movement. And at a certain point, I decided to take a choreography class. And a choreography, for those who don't know, choreography is learning how to make a dance. So I took this class, and the teacher was a man named Albert Pesso. And Albert Pesso is the founder of something called psychomotor therapy. And it's rather popular body-based therapy that that people do now, like somatic experiencing or others. But back then, because this was in 1968. It was a while back. He was inventing his technique, and he was inventing it on us in the class.
Wow.
Yeah. And so one of the things he had us do was everybody stood in a circle, and one person stood in the middle. And the person in the middle did this, like they held out their arms to each person in the circle. And so, when somebody holds, I'm trying to make that really be seen. Holding out your arms like that, the responses were quite different. Some people felt wonderful, like, oh, I'm welcoming you. And other people were like, oh, I didn't get that. Or, and they tears would roll down their cheeks. And for me, I was young, and it was like the first time that I consciously got how body positions and movements can really affect us.
Right.
And so it's so interesting that, more than 50 years later, that's my work. And I went to this random class, random. And it really, I didn't know it back then that it was going to be, so much of my life, but it is. I think, that's a major incident that I think has affected me.
And so in that experience, did you have a different sense of your body? Did something shift for you versus what you'd been doing up until that point with your dance?
Yeah, I think it made me, I want to say, feel more deeply or honor the feelings. I mean, I think we all feel a lot of stuff, but do we pay attention to it? Or, most people ignore a lot of what happens. And I think it allowed me to be more aware and to be more willing to process, because it was like somebody there is so upset from just holding out, seeing held out arms. It's like, wow, that's really moving, or it means something. At the time I had no idea what to do with it, but I knew that I was affected by it.
And so you were affected by the other person with the tears.
Yeah. And also the feelings in myself. And then as a dancer, just moving from those places of either the sadness or the joy. I mean, some people felt, wonderful joy and love. So, again, part of being human, it's all of that and all of those emotions that we want to be able to recognize and be with.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was your first taste of experiencing your body in a different way, perhaps. And then did you continue with the dance, or did you then start to go more deeply into what you're interested in now? How did your sort of career evolve from that point?
Yeah. And that class was in Boston. And then as I got older, I moved, I knew I wanted to dance more. And so I moved to New York City, which is where you go,
Right.
And it was wonderful. I loved my life in New York. It was in the early days of modern dance and a lot of experimental stuff. It was very, Twyla Tharp and people like that. It was just exciting with loft performances and people doing all kinds of different things. But what happened to me was kind of interesting. I mean, I loved sort of moving across the stage, the feeling of that. But I soon became more interested in how to move in a healthy way, and almost more important, or as important, how to not get injured. Because dancers, I mean, people in general get injured, but dancers get injured a lot. And so if you move one way, you get injured. If you move another way, you don't get injured. So that started to be like, that's what I'm really interested in. And so that's what I was doing in New York for 10 years, is helping people understand how to move. I mean, I studied the material and it was beautiful. The woman I worked with, we would go to the ballet together, and, in those days didn't have much money. So we sat in the balconies and we'd watch a performance, and a dancer would start to do a turn or something like that. And my teacher would say, he's going to fall off that turn. And he did. Because when you know what to look for if the muscles are pulling a certain way, they're going to let you turn. But if they're not pulling the right way, you're going to fumble it. And so I learned that. And that material is so valuable because it's really about how we're designed to move. I mean, your knee bends one way, it doesn't bend the other way. So a lot of people stand with their knees locked and which is literally trying to bend it backwards. And doesn't work.
Right. It's interesting, just as you were speaking there and describing the dance, I reminded in your book, you talk about the spiral nature of our bodies, and there's some fantastic diagrams which illustrate that. And that was something I sort of understood a little bit, but you really brought it home in that section of the book.
Yeah, the spirals they're, if you really study how the muscles form, everything's in spirals. It's really very beautiful. And even our daily movements, we're going to put the seatbelt on, we're spiraling all the time. So, but it's nice to recognize it.
Yeah. And I suppose when I think about, the toys I had when I was a kid, you don't think about them I wasn't ever really given that mental metaphor of the body. It was, I had an action man. The action men don't spiral, right? And nobody ever talked to me in terms of your spiraling body, right? It's interesting. It's just not in the lexicon, or at least it wasn't for me.
Right. Well, it's not for most people. And I'm certainly trying to change that and put it in, because I think that if we were to understand more of our design, I think we'd get injured less. I think we'd be healthier. And so that's sort of the next step in my journey. Right. From the just working with dancers in that way.
Right. Yeah. And just to finish that spiral point, because it did spark my interest. There's all these photos, right, of spirals in nature, and the double spiral, and in flowers, and even right down in our cells.
The DNA, it's perfect. Double helix spiral is our design. And it's also the medical.
That's right. Medical... I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, the two snakes around the staff. Yeah.
Yes, and if you look at ancient carvings in spiritual temples, there's almost always a spiral one way and a spiral the other way, sort of at the entrance. There's almost like a blessing of some sort. The double spiral has been around a long time. And I visited Uluru in Australia, which is the sacred home of the indigenous people. And so much of the indigenous art had those double spirals.
Interesting.
So some people knew about it.
Right. And so when you talk about your teacher and you're starting to work with dancers and you're helping them to not get injured, is this with the Alexander technique? Is that what you first learned, or was there something before that?
Yeah, that's when I was first exposed, because in New York City, at the time, the Alexander technique was not very well known. I heard about it there. And so for me, I was, like I said, I was living in New York, and then I moved, I was married, moved to Boston. And I left my dance community in New York, and in Boston, I was like, what should I do here? And I took a lesson in the Alexander technique. I took my first lesson and I thought, wow, this is very amazing, powerful work. And so I trained, that was again in the late 70s. I trained as an Alexander teacher, and it's very beautiful, that work.
And for those who haven't heard of the Alexander technique, and I must admit, I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever been to a class. I've But so yeah, just explain what that is.
Yeah, Alexander was an actor and he loved Shakespeare. And so he began to recite Shakespeare's work. And then he began to have sore throats and lose his voice. And so basically it took him 10 years, but he figured out why that was happening. And it was really about what he was doing with himself, how he was preparing to speak. It was something like in those days, he was Australian and a Tasmanian, I guess it's different. He was what was called an elocutionist, and he boom, 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 da, 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 that sort of certain posing. And he realized that it took him a long time to realize it, but he was tightening his throat, and that was causing him to lose his voice. And so the technique really teaches you basically what you're doing that you don't really notice that you're doing, and you move easier.
So bringing awareness to how you're using your body.
Yes, awareness, and then doing something about it also.
Right. And what would be the types of doings that one would engage in then?
Or you could use it for anything. I mean, if I'm going to pick up a pen, or I'm going to have my pen and I'm going to write something. So again, like, you mentioned, I was teaching at the university for 25 years. So you have to do some kind of academic things with the students as part of it. So you have them write. And some people hold the pen, like that. I call it getting white knuckles,
right,
from holding and when you realize, I mean, the pen weighs nothing, and how much effort do I really need to hold this pen?
Right.
So it can come in any form, and it feels different when I do that.
Yeah.
Or when, or of course, for most younger people, the more common thing is the phone, and it's like, no, what is, that sort of gripping and, or texting, text, and instead of, bum, 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 you can do it in different ways. And so it can be helpful to learn less harmful ways.
Yeah, I noted that in the book, postures for when we're holding the phone and using the phone without smudging. I love that. Like, try and use tell us about some ways to use the phone. I won't steal your thunder.
Yes. Oh, that's fine. You could steal it. Well, one of the big things, of course, is the head, just leaning, let's see, get it better, leaning down, because as your head is sort of like, when it's here, it's sort of like has very little weight because it's balanced. And as soon as you go, boom, it weighs 10 pounds. It weighs 20 pounds. It weighs 30. And I think it's 60 in the book. I can't remember, but and you just picture like 60-pound weight all the time, doesn't bode well in long term. Of course, short term is fine, especially when you're young and more flexible. But over time, it can be like not so great. That's people with neck pain. My neck. People do that, and they, in a totally other realm to them, say, "Oh, my neck is really hurting. I don't know why." And I'm like, well, if you're doing that all day, you might have a pain in your neck.
Right. Yeah.
So these are things that nobody pays attention to for the most part.
Yeah. And what I liked about it was, it's almost, I think I was running assumption. If I'm on my phone, it's like, it's just the cost of being on the phone. I'm going to be hunched and it's not going to be good for my posture. But that's a limiting belief, right? We can absolutely have the right way to look at a phone.
Or a less harmful way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or because, as we've seen, these things add up. The difficulties add up. And the fact is, you can do it another way. But now let's go on to my next step. We can come back to this if you want, but I think it kind of fits in. So I was teaching the Alexander technique and doing well in my practice. And then it would be like somebody, say, had maybe back pain. Some people would come for a few lessons or extended lessons, and the back pain would get better. Other people, they sort of got better, but then not better and better, and I'm like, what am I, why is that? What am I missing? And that's when I started to look around, and that's when I discovered the trauma work. And that was 25 years ago. Because my question came up, could this back pain be caused by something that happened in childhood or a long time ago? And when I found out the answer was yes, I was like, whoa. So the reason I'm telling you that now is because when you're talking about the phone thing, it's not just, okay, this is the good way to do it, and this is what I want to do, but something in me has to do that. And that's what I began to see. Like, yes, the system works well this way. This is our design, But there's also, I need to stand this way. I need to crunch like a pretzel. I need to, do all, because something in my emotions or my past tells me I need to do that from something that happened when I was younger. Like, one of the things that happened in this backstory was this, one of my students was, when she was 5 years old, was on a slide and sitting on the end of it, and an adult came down the slide and hit her in the back. And that was her back pain. So all of the sort of Alexander technique of saying, well, you can stand up straight and have a longer back and this and that, wasn't going to change, because this emotion of like this person, you did this to me, like I have to solve that and heal that. And so that's how the trauma work came about in my life.
Right. Yeah. Okay. From seeing people not improving through using the basic Alexander technique. Yeah.
Exactly. That there's something else there that, yes, you want to be upright and standing upright and open and free and expanded, but something inside says, I don't think that's a good idea. Last time I did that, it didn't go well. Yeah. So we all have some version of that, from my years of teaching and practice. Everybody has something.
Yeah. Nobody escapes unscathed, right?
I don't think so.
No. Yeah. I see that as a profound point you're making there, that for many of us, simply offering like the optimal way to do something with our bodies, with our breath, with our mind, isn't sufficient if that individual is carrying trauma in the domain that we're offering that advice or that guidance.
Exactly. And, sometimes it's fine. And you do, you do, oh, I can do this. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, good. And I'm off and it's fine. Other times it's just not. And, a moment ago you said we all have, and I said we all have. And I think takes us again back to being human.
Yeah.
Part of the deal here.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is, and this is really beautiful. Well, maybe two things. the neuroscience now discovering, I don't know if that's the word, the neuroplasticity is that we can change. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's really good to know. And the other piece that I think is I don't know, it's the sort of rock or foundation of my work is that I know that healing or well-being is our design.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. When you get a cut, your system heals that cut. You don't need to do a thing. So that tells us that it tells me, or I interpret it as the system can heal.
Yeah. But I think that's an instructive point, because we can heal a cut without any conscious intent, right? The skin just heals, and then a few weeks later,
you have to. It just heals, but you can't get dirt in it. You have to cover it. You can't keep like aggravating it or something. So there's a little bit of care around that.
Yeah, okay, granted, but virtually all of us effortlessly heal from skin cuts.
Yes.
The same is not true of emotional trauma. So what is it about us humans that means we don't simply automatically heal from our early traumas?
Well, I think part of it is the setup of our society. I think that our biology developed in a more sort of family-oriented, hunter-gatherer kind of style, so that, when something happened, families lived like the parents and the children and the grandparents and the aunts and uncles lived next door or close, so that when something happened to the child, there was somebody there. And I think that's one of the most difficult pieces in trauma, or what causes trauma, is that there was nobody there.
Mm.
And so in societies where, there's more family around or people around or support, I talk a lot about support. And maybe if you want, we can do a experiential practice with it. But I think if the support is there, just like the support for the cut is like, well, don't get dirt in it, or don't smash it against the wall, or rub it against something. Give it time and space to heal. And I think that that's not really a setup in our society, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right, isn't it? We don't have that close contact of family members. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Continuum Concept.
Yes, that's
Judith. I'm blanking on her surname, but Judith Laidlaw.
Yes,
who does the anthropological study of a tribe somewhere in South America and observes very close contact continually, and men and women able to cry freely as they process upsets, and just this seeming absence of the common pathologies and neuroses that we see in Western society.
Exactly. That is exactly what I was saying, because that's our biology.
Yeah.
That's our, like, inside, that's what wants to happen. There's biological expectations. The biology expects when a child is born, the biology expects to be held. The biology expects to be nurtured, because without that, a human child doesn't survive. So it's survival response. But what's interesting is, so let's take this into something. So if the child is born and the parent is holding the child, and the parent is on their phone or cooking or taking care of the other kids and really not putting attention here, the child being held here doesn't really feel supported.
Right.
And the translation of that is, if I don't feel supported, I need to hold myself up. Later in life, that's translated to, I need to do everything. And this is where a lot of people live.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And then, it comes back to back pain. And I think of all the people that, I've got to hold my own back. And that literally becomes their reality.
Exactly.
No one else has got my back.
Yeah, no one's got my back. You're exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And just as we're talking, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, should we do a practice now? Or did you want
to? Go for it.
Just because I don't want to leave people too much in like, well, you don't have any support and you don't. Yeah. So let's do something with that. So as I assume you're sitting in a chair.
I am sitting in a chair.
Yeah, I am also. So this can be done in many different ways, but let's take it from the chair place. So begin to notice. Well, let's start with your feet. Notice the contact of your feet to whatever's under you. If your feet are on the ground, the floor, just start to notice. And as you bring your attention there, notice sort of how much you weren't there before. Right?
Yeah,
how much
I do notice.
Yeah. Just notice the contact. Your feet are in contact. And it matters. And also, since we're sitting, your hips are on the chair. So the same thing there. Just notice right where you meet it. Right where you meet it. And again, it's like, oh yeah.
Yes, you're right. I've now become conscious in a way I wasn't.
Right. Yeah. And then we're going to understand that we live in a gravitational field, which we do. So we have the force of gravity coming this way. Then we also have the earth is spinning. So it gives off a centrifugal force. So there's something coming this way. So we have the gravitational force this way, the anti-gravity coming this way. So right now we're feeling the gravitational force toward the planet, but we're adding the anti-gravity, which comes up this way. And wherever you're in contact, whatever's under you, you can feel that. You can feel that wherever, either in your feet or on the chair or both. And it's a split second. Oh. And just allowing your system to take that in. I'm supported. Ground is supporting me. The chair is supporting me. Whatever is under me is supporting me. And what happens with that?
So connected and so secure.
What'd you say?
Connected and secure.
Wouldn't that be different and nice?
Yeah. Really?
And it's available.
And held.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
No, we wouldn't.
It's remarkable.
We wouldn't be looking for it outside all the time like we do.
Yeah.
It's available all the time.
Right.
It's available all the time. And you don't have to go to the gym and put on spandex gym shorts or anything or pay money to anybody. It's your awareness, and it's always there and always available.
Yeah.
And somebody listening, which this, of course, will happen, somebody will say, I don't feel the support in here or there. And that would be where the work would be.
Right. Yeah. But what's also interesting for me is we didn't do the exercise on my arms, but my arms are resting on armrests. And I immediately became more conscious of the support that the armrests are giving to my arms. It's like the whole body feels supported.
That's exact. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm so glad. Yes, my hands are resting on my knees, on my legs. And as soon as I recognize, yes, that my arms are supported from whatever is touching something under you, there is the potential of this. And for those who think that's a little bit woo-woo or too far out, there's also the concept in physics, and it's called the ground reaction force, GRF. And what it is, ground reaction force is as much weight as I put in the ground will meet me there. It's a thing. You can look it up and Google it. It's in physics, ground reaction force. And so there's this potential that we all have to always almost be weightless. Now, of course, we know.
I have something of that quality right now. I didn't use that word, but that resonates.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we know a lot more goes into how we experience ourselves and how we feel weighted from all kinds of things. But just the sort of physicality that's available to us is this quality. It's very interesting.
It's interesting. And I know you mentioned it in the book because I remember reading it. And I've done grounding techniques in the past. And in fact, I've helped clients with grounding techniques. And I've focused on allowing the feet to sink into the earth, right? And you flip that and say no, allow the earth to support you. And it does make a huge difference.
Exactly. Yeah. People talk about grounding. And when I watch people do grounding, they just like grinding themselves down.
Right.
And like, my idea is very different. My idea of support is coming in touch with the ground, not to go held by it, but to receive this coming up. And uprightness, everybody wants to sort of stand up straight and, muscles up. And then 2 seconds later ends up down here, It's like the true uprightness is not something that you paste on. It's something that you open to receive. So the uprightness comes from the ground and you receive it and, there I am.
Yeah. Such an important point. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about, holding back. Because those grounding techniques, when you hear send your roots down into the earth, it's all about me expending effort to make myself safe, right? And this is saying, no, allow the support that's already there.
Yes, exactly. And if you want to see it as roots, the roots go down, but then something comes up the roots. If you want to use that image, that's okay. But just don't leave out this aspect of it. And then feel like you're down here and thinking like, oh, I'm all slouched over. I need to muscle myself up. It's just like, no, that you don't want to do it that way.
Yeah. Don't be all yang and no yin. Yeah.
I love it. Exactly.
But that's well,
yes.
I don't want to assert that's our culture. That's like sending something out there. It's certainly I can,
yes,
get all yang and yeah. And I mean, this is very just really important for me, especially and I'm hoping as well for people listening to take this perspective.
I think so. I think so. Even if people listen to this and take just one of the bits or this bit, even if you just from the whole talk, if you just thought about your whatever is under you supports you, and takes us into the next thing. As soon as you have that support, go back. If you don't have support, I said before, you have to hold yourself up. the place we often do it is here. Everybody's, oh, my shoulders, my neck, my back.
That's where I
right?
get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the holding here, you restrict your breath. So when you have the support and this can let go, oh, there's a breath. There's my breathing.
Right. As not just sort of launch straight into the breathing, but begin by experiencing being held and then work towards the breath.
Yeah. And in your phrase, work toward the breath, is allow the breath.
Aha. There I go again.
Yeah, exactly. We're this is the interpret. We are culturally in that. Everybody would say that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wait a minute, don't say that, because then you're going to work to breathe. And do we really work to breathe? Do we really need to work to breathe? If you're not gripping your chest for your lungs not to be able to expand, they're going to do that.
Yeah.
But again, we're going to go back to the emotional. So much of our emotions are held in here. So of course this is tight. Of course I'm not breathing. Of course I have to work to breathe and make the breath happen. Because I'm holding here. If I let go here, I'll use you because you're a male, crying, in when you were 15 years old in school, it probably wouldn't go well, right? So what do you do?
It wouldn't even, it's so far beyond what you would ever, it's so, certainly for me, it's just never even emerges as a possibility, right?
Exactly.
It's so buried from so young.
It's exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So to open that area it takes some attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember when I was first getting into my own process and my own work, and I've shared this on the podcast before, doing warrior poses and opening my chest and then finding the tears coming because I hadn't been able to open that way.
Yeah. So again, that goes back to the question before. Earlier we were talking about when you asked something like, why don't the emotions heal quicker? Kind of thing.
Automatically, yeah, right. Like, why doesn't it just happen like we heal a cut?
Right, because when you say, there was, especially males weren't allowed. It wasn't okay to cry. I mean, it wasn't okay for anybody, but especially that. Then there's our answer.
Yeah. It goes back again. I'm thinking of the Continuum Concept book and her recording grown men openly crying in front of the tribe, in the arms of their women. And these are warrior men, right? It's not like they lose any masculinity. They're probably more masculine than most Western men, but they're crying openly in front of the tribe.
See, that's part of what you're doing with, when you're calling your work being human. Being human is all of that. It is that's being human. Yeah. And the more we can normalize it and say it's okay, we're doing our job,
Yeah.
We're doing our part in the changing world that we're living in.
Yeah. And there's so much richness in what you're saying. So, but let's start in terms of your journey. So you're starting to ask this deeper question. Why is it that some people aren't just healing through these techniques, and then it's something in their earlier life. So how would you work with somebody when you find that they try let's say they try one of these techniques, they're finding that they're not feeling held in a particular place? What's your process for working with somebody who is exhibiting signs of trauma?
Well, it's interesting because what I really kind of find myself doing and kind of like to do is work with people who don't think they have trauma, but they do, kind of thing. So I'll tell one story, and then if that, we'll see where we go. I work a lot in my practice with musicians and performers. I like that work, and I've been doing it a long time. So one time I was working with a violin player. So what happens, what I do is the performer gets up and does something, but sings a song or plays the violin, and then we talk about it, and then they do it again and it changes, something like that. So this woman got up and she played the violin. And then after she finished, I said to her, what did you notice? And she said, I felt really anxious. And I said, any idea why? And she said, well, when I played that piece, she said, I love the piece. I've been playing it since I was, young. But about 7 years ago, I played it for an audition, and the audition didn't go well. So I thought to myself, oh, well, that's kind of routine. If you did something in a situation that didn't go well, it's not going to be that comfortable to be doing it again. And then I said to her, do you want me to tell you what I noticed? She said, yeah. So I said, I noticed that when you were playing, you looked down at your violin the whole time. You never looked up. And so there's kind of question in the performance world about where to look. Some people say, you should look out at the audience. And other people, especially you see rock musicians, and they're just like inside themselves and they never look out, and that's fine. So there's no rules on that. But I did notice it. So I said to her, I kind of noticed that you just never looked up. And she said, oh. I said, do you want to try playing and look up a little bit? And she said, okay. So she started to play. And as she looked up and she went like that. And I said, what happened? And she said, as soon as I looked up, I saw that audition room from 7 years ago. And I said to her, did you know that? Did you know that you weren't looking up because you were going to see that? And she said, no. So interesting.
Yeah.
That this pattern, something in her was stuck in that moment of that audition. And she had, if I said to her, do you have any traumas, anything? She, no, nothing, no. But there it was.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that, to me, that, those kind of stories and that kind of thing is like, whoa, that's so interesting.
Yeah. What's hidden. And
yeah, exactly.
And that's very familiar to me in terms of my own work, is what it sounds to me like. Well, you're actively inviting someone to go against their pattern and to notice what comes out. That seems to be a sort of core mechanism of all the different modalities of trauma work.
And sometimes you go into the pattern too.
Right. Or exaggerate the pattern. It can be the other way, right?
Yes. Yes. Like this one, I'll tell you one more story. This young woman, she was an actor and she was working on some lines. And she said, my head always wants to be a little bit tilted. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Like, it can be, balanced. And I said, did anything ever happen? She said, no, nothing, no major anything. I said, oh, okay, well, who knows? A little while later, she said, oh, wait a minute. When I was younger, I was in the ocean and I got hit by a wave. And I said, that. She got hit by this wave. Her head tilted and part of her just stayed there. And so she said, So I said, that. She said, oh, oh, oh. And just the realization that it was done.
Wow. Simple as that.
It's not always that simple, but
It can be. That's the
right. But again, because you say to the person, did anything ever happen? And they say no. And to most people, being hit by a wave, it isn't the worst thing in the world, or trauma. Or I'm sure when she came out of the water that she maybe didn't even tell anybody that it happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Aaron said, oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the human ability to suppress on a long-term basis is, it's a great strength.
Yes.
And it's a flaw, isn't it, in some way?
Yeah, because again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the family being around, and if the family was really watching, oh, what happened? You got hit by the wave. Oh, are you okay? And she goes, oh, yeah, no, I got really scared. It was really scary. Oh, well, okay, it's over and you're okay. And then the head would have righted itself right in that moment if somebody had supported.
Yeah. And allowed the person to go through the healing process at the time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why some people get trauma and other people don't. Some people have horrific things happen, but they process it in the moment and they're okay.
Yeah.
And other people don't. And it gets caught and stuck inside. And years and years and years, it's still there.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's like that's what defines it as a trauma. It's the ability. It's not having had an acute emotional reaction to something or acute negative emotional experience. And we're not able to process it.
Exactly. A trauma is not in the event.
Yeah.
It's what you're left with.
Yeah. And it reminds me of a story in the book when you were working with an actress who'd fallen.
Oh, yeah.
And the direct, just tell that story, because I think it's instructive to what we're talking about.
Yes. So it was actually, they were doing, it was a dance scene. They were doing some movement and they sort of twirled her around and she banged her head. And so she was lying on the floor, and I was sort of a movement coach. So I came over and she said, oh, I'm okay. And I said, no, you're not. Stay there. Stay on the floor. Stay there, lying down. And so a little bit of time passed, and the director of the film came over and was like, time is money. Like, get her up, get going. And I was that, no, she cannot move. You just have to wait for the system to process. This happened. I'm not okay. I need to just breathe and lie on the ground and have somebody here with me and let my internal process do something with this. And then a few minutes later, a few minutes, and she kind of, and it's like, okay, now you can go back.
Yeah. And we're back. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that, in our, again, this is a society. If I fall or if you fall in public, we are so embarrassed that we get up immediately. And that's the worst thing you can do. When you fall, you just stay there. Let your system process. Because if your system went I'm falling. And if you just get up immediately, but if you just stay, oh, wow, that was, whew, okay, let me stay here. But who would do that in public,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's important, and we're back to this theme of support. You were providing her with support and some protection from the from the hurried director.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
she had that support to run her own process.
Yes, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that for protection. Exactly. Yeah. That's what so many of us miss.
Yeah.
That protection.
And that principle applies whether, in this case, relatively speaking, a minor trauma, or obviously some of the much more severe traumas that kids can experience.
Yeah, and adults. If protection protection was there, some things wouldn't have happened in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, even if we couldn't prevent the event itself, it's afterwards, as you couldn't in that case, right? She banged her head, but it's in the aftermath. You were there to support and protect while she went through her process. You weren't, come on, lassie,
Right.
back to work.
Get on with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is so prevalent, isn't it? In whether it's a physical injuries, in some ways we have seems to have a little bit more empathy for, but certainly emotional ones.
Yeah, because you don't see it. You don't see why you're behaving that way. You're fine. Well, they're not.
Right. The other thing I wanted to loop back to, and let's see how we can weave this in, but you said something really important. My choice of language, when I said work my way towards breathing, and in the start of the book you talk about, which I love, by the way, and I think it's the first time I've heard the term, but you talk about spirit, mind, body. So we hear a lot about mind, body. We hear a lot less about spirit, mind, body, which it feels like where the culture wants to get to. We might just have to wait a few decades. But I thought that was
hopefully sooner, but I hear you.
Okay, I'm not going to put that out there. Hopefully tomorrow. But the use of, so we've talked a lot about the body, right, in this conversation so far, and of course this book, as you say in the start of the book, really focuses on the body. But use of language, the mind, and then ultimately connection to spirit. How do you work in those realms? In conjunction with working with the body.
It's a great question, and it's something that it almost, words are hard with it. It's something to feel and be aware of. It's like if we took the support process that we did, the exploration. So I have the ground, and then I have the support. So I have myself. And then to continue that, I have my environment, and some of which I can see. I can see the walls and the windows, etc. But there's some stuff that you can't see. But we kind of know that there's something there, and it's part of me and the air that I breathe. So there's a lot we can't see, but we kind of know is there. So I think it's in that realm to recognize that there's like, I'm breathing. Who's doing that? How is that happening?
Yeah.
Or the trees are growing. How is that happening? I don't see anybody doing that, or you know what I mean? But there's something. And I think that something is very much a part of us. And there's lots of different religions and spiritualities and mysticisms that show that people want something of that, or respect for nature. You can call it that, the spirit of nature. Like I say, it's something's going on out there, or not out there, in there. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it sounds like for you, it's principally about acknowledging that.
Yeah.
As opposed to specific practices or anything else.
Well, I think the practices, it's like, what are the practice, like prayer or meditation? What does that do? It's not so much like in prayer that you like ask, please God, I want, a new car or whatever. It's not about that. It's about, I think it's more about or meditation. It's about changing my state. It's about being able to, maybe be anxious and to really not wanting that to rule my life. And so I'm going to meditate and just come to a different place in myself and in what's around me. Everybody has tried meditation, and it can do that. It can allow but again, we have to be careful there, because not for everybody. If somebody has very deep trauma, then when you meditate, you bump into a lot of what has been buried. And so I'm not telling everybody meditate, I'm saying that that's one way. It's one way that has been around a long time and helps a lot of people, but it's not for everybody. But I don't think anything is for everybody, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know from my own experience, I tried meditation. I think I probably first attempted it in my early 20s, and it wasn't until I'd done a decade of trauma release work before I was just sufficiently emotionally stable to be able to meditate. And then, of course, I have experienced these altered states, but I wasn't able to for a long time.
Right. Well, I think that's, part of your question about the spirit is that, that spiritualities, it's, if we're so wrapped up in our traumas and trying to survive, it's hard. It's hard to let myself do something else.
Yeah.
But it's there, again, like support. Something's happening. And I think it's like, what is it like? I think it's like we can see like 4% of what goes on in the rest of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot going on that we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then this use of, we've discerned language another number of instances in this, in this podcast, and we've looked at language. And so how do you view that, the relationship between thought, language, and the body, and how do you work with that?
Well, I think I think that we have to be more careful, because, well, like, to use the example, I'm working hard to breathe, or, something, work to get the breath going.
Working towards breath or something, yeah.
Right, working towards breath, that if that's what you say, that's what you're going to do. And so you really want to, and I'm not saying you, but the big you, we want to be more mindful and careful about the words that we use, because the words that we use are pretty much what we mean, and so we want to be sure that that's what we actually mean, because the thing is, we all have like a sort of a map of who we are, like where certain parts, where is my shoulder, how I do this. We have maps of how we do things. And the maps are sometimes correct and sometimes incorrect. And if you've got something mapped wrong, then like the map is I need to work to breathe.
Right.
So that's an incorrect. Well, it's correct for the moment, because if I'm holding my ribs tight for whatever reason, then yes, you do have to work to breathe.
It's accurate, but it might not be optimal.
Exactly. So you can catch it there. People, like when I'm working with somebody and they'll say something, oh, the shoulder's really bothering me. And I say, the shoulder? What if you said my shoulder? And it's like, oh, my shoulder. Oh, because the shoulder objectifies.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, when I think about, that applies to disease, the cancer has got a grip on me.
Exactly. As if it's like the pen is something that I hold. I can let go of the pen and can't let go of it.
Yeah.
I can, but not like that.
Or the flu has got me on my back. Just as I ponder on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a disease is more a process.
Mm.
It's not a thing that you have, but it's a process that's happening in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the body, in a sense, is a process, right? It's an unfolding process, right? It's not like a thing that we own.
Or it's not even a thing that you feel. You don't feel your body. I know this always, I'll repeat it. You don't feel your body. Your body's not an object that you feel. What you feel is yourself in a certain state of organization. What you're organized to do or to be. That's what you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big shift.
Can't say much after that one.
But that really ties in your message, that the way you've expressed it evokes this idea of spirit, mind, body, which we really should just have a word like, or self. I mean, in fact, you use expanded self. Is that perhaps what you're pointing to when you talk about the expanded self?
Yeah. And also the idea is of, like you just said, it would be a lot easier if we had a word for body, mind, self, spirit, for just like that entity of ourselves. But some people say self with a capital S. That's but then most people think of self with a capital S, not including the body, so what is a word that would include everything? Human being, maybe,
Yeah. But it does point to something, doesn't it, that we're sort of scrabbling around for words.
Right.
Or is there something in our culture that we don't have? Like, we can have however many different words for snow, and we don't even have one word for this thing we're pointing.
Right. Like in some of the African countries, somebody once told me that when I was talking about this, that they have 50 words or 100 words for banana, because there's so many different kinds of banana. They have all these different words for it, and we have sort of lump,
It's interesting. So it feels like we've had such a broad sweep through, your work and your perspectives here. Is there a specific aspect you feel like we haven't touched on that it's worth exploring?
I don't. Well, maybe one point, and this sort of started in our pre-conversation before we started recording. I just want to say that the concept that many people teach and believe in, that's called belly breathing.
Yes.
And that, it's...
You told me off.
I couldn't let it go. So I felt bad that was our introduction to each other, but it's something I just am so careful of. Is because so many people in the well-being world, in the performance music, they breathe into your belly. Well, air does not go to your belly. It just doesn't. So then we ask, where does the air go? The air goes into your lungs. And so allowing the air to go into your lungs, and as your diaphragm moves down, yes, your belly moves. And that's very important, but it's not directing air into your belly. That is not what's happening. That's before what I was saying about the map. That's an incorrect map. Air does not go to your belly. If air went into your belly, you would die immediately. It doesn't go there. Your lungs fill with air, your diaphragm moves, and yes, your belly moves. And when I say your lungs fill with air, I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just saying your ribs move. Or let's do a moment. If you just recognize that as you breathe, the air goes into your lungs. And because they're elastic bags, they move. And your ribs sit on top of your lungs. And so they move. And your belly responds, so that moves. And your shoulders sitting on your ribs, so they move. So your torso is moving from the air coming into your lungs. And that's a different breath.
I do feel more connected because I'm just practicing as you're speaking.
Good.
Yeah, and my habit when I want to do deep breathing is to visualize to focus on the belly and physically my belly pushing out and sucking in. But when I did it then and I focused on the lungs, I felt more connected.
Because ask any high school student, where does air go when you breathe? It goes into your lungs. It's like, part of me is like, why isn't anybody paying attention to that fact? I mean, again, for the belly people, your belly moves. It's not saying it doesn't, but the air itself goes into your lungs. You can't argue on that one. On that note,
yeah,
that's my final.
Yeah. No, that's well, I suppose I just had another experience of the power of the way you work, and that is another experience of profound connectedness. So that's something I'm not just reading about. I'm experiencing as we're talking. So
yes, and that
power of your perspective.
Yeah. And that connectedness is important for you, and then it allows you to connect to me, and that we connect to everybody else. It's a great word that you use.
Yeah, and I think it's not just. Well, I know it's not just the techniques you're having me doing; it's me being in your presence. Right? We're all. There's a field I'm tapping into right now that.
Right.
Sitting here, I'm getting a beam, right?
And we're letting everybody have that.
Well,
and again, and isn't that the spirit thing that you asked about?
Yeah.
Must be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got to stop myself getting too much of a spiritual ego here. But you're right. Sorry?
Yeah. I said some is okay.
Some is okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I don't want to is that my ego trying to tell me that I'm not as powerful as so it's just, but I want to attest to the the power of the connection you're creating for me in my own body. And I suspect that's because you're so connected to your own body, and that's emanating, and we've got an exchange here. And that's, yeah,
But
that's
again, the connection is from the universe.
yeah. Yeah. And the thing it speaks to here as well is, and I can find my background's engineering, right? So I love a good technique, and I love mechanic, and that's often where I'm very oriented, and I get excited about reading books and learning new processes, and what I'm experiencing here is beyond that, right? I'm sure the same person could teach me the same thing about breathing into my lungs, not my belly, and I wouldn't have the same impact. It's the fact you've done the work on yourself, and it's your beingness, right? That's helping to regulate me, right?
Absolutely.
Beyond the technique.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I was saying. My strong convictions of belief about what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's not me. It's like what we say, I don't have a horse in this race. The air goes into your lungs. That's not me,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at what is.
Yeah. 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 You're channeling something, but maybe it's like you've become a clean channel, if you like. Perhaps that's another way of looking at it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Betsy, thank you so much for making the time. It must be early for you, right? You're on the West Coast, so.
Yes. It's been a pleasure, really. I really enjoy our conversation and our back and forth of ideas and feelings and emotions. And so very pleasurable to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful to have had this experience and conversation. But yeah, it's a conversation. It's the experience is the word that comes to mind. It's not just been words back and forth. So I've appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so we will put talking about words. We will put the link to Humanual, Manual for Being Human, an epic journey to your expanded self, into the show notes. Where else would you send people who are interested in your work or perhaps working with you, Betsy?
Humanual.com is probably you can you can join the newsletter, and I send out the newsletter and say what I'm doing when and stuff like that. I'm next week I'm flying to London actually to go to Belfast. There's a trauma conference in Belfast. And then in September, I'll be at Oxford University. There's a big the master series trauma conference I'll be speaking at. So all of this is in my newsletter. So sign up for that. You'll know where I am.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you.